Hey everyone, and welcome to one of my latest videos, and it's kind of not really a latest breaking news thing by any stretch of the imagination. Talking about an issue that came up just about a month ago, and talked to various people throughout the last few weeks about it, but I finally have had some time to present a video. So this is talking about the referee Matt Lake and his Facebook post that, I don't know, go viral, I don't know, but it got a lot of attention, talking about what it's like to be a referee in the middle of the CRAA / USA Rugby versus NCR battle. So let's have a look at some of the things that Matt had to say, and we'll talk about them. So as we scroll through Matt Lake's statement, you see really the position of a referee who's in the middle of this situation and doesn't really want to be. And this is also the case of some coaches as well, that they don't really want to deal with the overarching politics of everything. They just want to get going, do what they normally do. And here really it's the crux of the matter. What most people don't realize, Lake says, is how both sides are using referees as pawns to further their goals. Now this is absolutely true. USA Rugby has a habit of using referees to enforce their rules, and this has been happening for decades, really because USA Rugby doesn't have a lot of things they can do to enforce their rules other than to say, we won't allow or we won't assign referees to your outlaw or renegade competition. This happened with the Super League, even though, and the problem there was they didn't really have any leverage there because the old Super League was the best club competition going. And so referees wanted to be involved in that. So USA Rugby kind of had to blink first on that one. It happened with a competition called Major League Rugby at the time. It was the late 90s, early 2000s, which was something they couldn't really control as well to a certain extent, and seemed a little small-minded. It's a little bit different here simply because NCR, specifically the CRC 7s, wasn't a sanctioned competition. It wasn't a case of, in the Super League, those were all USA Rugby members playing a game. So what's the problem? But with the CRC, they hadn't sanctioned the competition. NCR proudly says they're not members of USA Rugby. So it's a little bit different. So I'm going to skip past a couple of things that I'm told aren't quite correct, and we're going to go back to those. But we will talk about Lake's position as representative for USA Rugby's National Regional Development Group. He's refereed NCR games. He's refereed CRAA games. He's in the middle of this. He has good perspective on both sides. And he says, both sides have shown an inability to put rugby first. Both have chosen to allow this conflict to fester for over 3 years without resolution. As a result, at least 2 referees and 1 referee coach were pulled from last weekend's CRAA championships. That would be last weekend. He's written this in May 12th, so this would be the May 6th finals, after having officiated at NCR's Collegiate Rugby Championships the previous week. Other referees have been called by USA Rugby with a general warning that further participation in NCR national events may disqualify them from any CRAA or USA Rugby assignments. The removal of match officials from CRAA Championship weekend represents a significant escalation, and any hypothetical consequence in the past has now become real. Putting aside the fact that these officials made a choice despite knowing the possible consequences, the real issue is that it is unacceptable for referees to be put in that situation to begin with. So on that I would say to Lake, and I would say to those referees, you can't put aside that fact. Put aside the fact that they made their own decisions and they knew there were consequences. There were consequences. You may argue about the consequences later, right? You may say, look, last month, you put us in this position. It's unfair. You got to stop. Great. Referees should do that. But to be surprised that you were warned that you weren't going to potentially get assignments post CRC because you refereed in the CRC, you can't put aside that and say, don't even look at that. You still have to look at that because that did happen, and it shouldn't have been a surprise. At the same time, both sides have also engaged in practices that are disappointing, at least in my opinion, says Lake. USA Rugby and CRAA putting referees in a position to choose sides between organizations isn't acceptable, and pulling assignments or making them ineligible for certain events is even worse. Referees should not be used as leverage or pawns in a fight that has nothing to do with us. The rhetoric coming from NCR isn't any better, pushing an anti-USA Rugby agenda through emotional and ill-considered outbursts on social media and an inability to move forward instead of holding on to past grievances only hurts their cause. NCR leadership has made this personal, and as a result, their position is becoming more intractable and their conduct less defensible. Really, the pawn, using referees as pawns, they don't like it. I did talk to some people at USA Rugby, and there's a little bit of clarification, so bear with me on this. Number one, referees weren't banned. There was no banning. What they were is, as the wording you see from Lake, if they chose to participate in NCR national events, they may not be getting an assignment from a CRAA or USA Rugby event. And the key thing was that the CRC was held on the last weekend in April, and the CRAA finals weekend was a week later. Well, and this is what USA Rugby people are telling me, it just looks bad. It just looks bad to say, oh, these referees were in an unsanctioned event, but we're cool with having them come to our most important collegiate event a week later. So they said no to those three. Now, I talked to at least one of those referees, and a week later he was doing a CRAA event or a USA Rugby event. And he said, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes sense if you think about it in terms of PR, because it just doesn't look good to have referees in what USA Rugby considers an outlier event, and then the very next week have them referee their major event. They just didn't like it, so they just didn't put it in. It's also not so much PR, but relations with the membership. The membership, the CRAA membership, they're not happy if they see softening from USA Rugby. And to be honest, there are some people within CRAA who want USA Rugby to play really hardball. What USA Rugby is trying to do is play kind of semi-hardball. So in the end, what Lake has pointed out is a very, very important issue. Referees can be used as pawns, probably shouldn't be. They're one of the only pieces of recourse that USA Rugby has to fight some of the issues coming from NCR. At the same time, glad he said it really, Matt Lake talked about the rhetoric coming from NCR. They fight their battles on social media, they say kind of snotty things, and it doesn't help. So what's the solution? Well, the solution, first of all, let's try and not use people as pawns. Referees, really, they just want to be assigned to the best games. Let's try and talk about a plan that could be acceptable to both sides. And there are some efforts being made to do that. But, and I've said this several times, both sides have to move. One side has to move in terms of the money and what they're asking or demanding to be a USA Rugby member. And one side has to just stop talking the way they talk and stop acting like they've invented collegiate rugby and that they're in control of it, because they're not. Does USA Rugby own rugby in America? Of course not. Can you get a rugby ball? Cool. You see my cool rugby balls? Can you just pick up a rugby ball, go with a bunch of friends and go play a rugby game, even a full contact rugby game at your local park? Of course you can. Now, somebody gets hurt. Maybe they don't have any recourse, right? They don't, they've got their own health insurance, but if you kick a ball to touch and it goes into the parking lot and smashes someone's window or damages a car or hits, God forbid, hits a little kid in the head, you're on your own. That's kind of one of the deals with USA Rugby. But, yes, you can play rugby anytime you want. The question is, can you be in a competition anytime you want? No. For any competition there is in the United States, in the world, you have to follow some kind of rule. Whether it's a monetary thing, there's usually a monetary thing, but there might be some other rules in terms of who you are, where your players come from, player gender, all those things. What we run into with the NCR issue is NCR feels that they should be able to be sanctioned or supported by USA Rugby, even though they're not members. They can pay a sanctioning fee. They did that last year with CRC. It was higher this year, much higher this year. They didn't want to pay it. But that's the rules. And in fact, if you look at the Ted Stevens Act, that's the rules. You should be able to charge a fee, a reasonable fee. What's reasonable? Well, it doesn't say so in the rules, so we got to figure that out. The upshot of Matt Lake's statement, however, is to perhaps put a spotlight on the dilemma that referees have. That it's unfair to use referee assignments as a carrot or a stick with regard to a relationship between USA Rugby and NCR that referees have no control over. At the same time, referees do have to pay attention to who's NCR and who's not NCR and what games they're playing, and perhaps check. And you know what most people really don't like doing is asking permission instead of asking for forgiveness. But it may be they have to check. I don't think they're going to like that. I don't think they're going to enjoy that, and I think there's going to be a bit more rebellion if they find they have to do that every week. But I do think that maybe this little piece of complaint from the referee side might be a small catalyst for finally fixing things.